Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.
Hello and welcome to Capes on the Couch, where comics get counseling. I'm Anthony Sitko.
And I'm Dr. Issues.
This is issue number 29, another one of our Patreon President selected episodes. Our good friend Brian asked us to do Wolverine,
Logan,
James Howlett. Was it Patches McGee?
That's it. Okay, I apologize. I broke the flow there, everyone.
That's okay. I was like, I remember he's got another nickname with the eye patch and everything, right? Because, you know, a 5'5" white guy with an eye patch in Japan isn't going to arouse suspicion at all.
Not to mention all the other things that he's capable of.
Brian has asked us to cover quite possibly certainly the most popular X-Man in Marvel Comics, if not one of the most popular characters in Marvel Comics history. Just, again, everywhere. God help you if you are a Wolverine completionist.
No, that's unhealthy. You know what? Not just unhealthy for your mental condition, it's also unhealthy for your bank account. Absolutely.
I was going to say that's definitely going to be a very expensive thing. I mean, God knows how much money I've spent on being a Moon Knight completionist, and Moon Knight he's barely B level at best. He is not Wolverine that they literally at one point in the 80s and 90s just slapped him on the cover and they said, Wolverine's not really in this issue, but we're putting him on the cover so that you'll buy it.
That's right. It's a great marketing play. The good news is the character stands the test of time, so even though someone like me did suffer some Wolverine fatigue at some point, it came back pretty well. And once again, I'm going to credit the film industry on that. I know it's not the MCU, but just saying, they did a good job, I think, revitalizing a character that had been, pardon the pun, done to death.
Yes, I will not dispute that. I don't think Hugh Jackman physically fits the character, but he has embodied Wolverine now for, close to 20 years over I think 9 or 10 films. And everyone just envisions Hugh Jackman, Wolverine, they are one and the same. And that is an instance where the actor has just gone above and beyond when it comes to portraying the character that he's done and just taken it and done, I think, a great amount of justice to the character, because he is a very versatile character and can be put in a number of situations. But Hugh Jackman did an amazing job with everything that he was given from the very first X-Men movie all the way through to the Origins piece of hot trash that it was, to the Wolverine, which I didn't think was that bad. It wasn't a spectacular film, but it was okay. And then Logan was just heart-wrenching and I cried, and it's a great film. So kudos to Hugh Jackman, and maybe one of these days Ryan Reynolds will be able to get Hugh Jackman out of retirement to play the character in a Deadpool film. We can only hope.
Yeah, that's something that I was looking forward to when I thought of it, but I don't know. I'm not going to keep my hopes up. I'm just going to leave it in the back of my mind.
So before we get started with the official start of the episode, I want to give a quick shout out to Marvel Mythos Podcast. They were kind enough to shout us out. Elizabeth Sparks is a fan of the show. She's one of the co-hosts, and she has a background in psychology. So I know, Doc, when you found out about that, there's definite interest. So be prepared. There is definitely a possibility for a crossover at some point.
I hope so. And I hope Anthony didn't kill it by his description and destruction of Halloween, in our previous episode.
Listen, I got over it. Okay. I had to get it out of my system. I apologized or, didn't apologize. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. But I had to say it. And I'm not the only one who does not like Halloween, okay? I saw on Facebook there were a number of other people that are fatigued with the whole candy and parades and costumes and such.
Right.
Give me half-price candy corn on November 1st, and I'm good.
Right. And ignore candy corn because that's terrible stuff. And make sure that you have your own personal catharsis when you get the opportunity and it's approved by society. I wrote that on the Capes on the Couch blog just to let people know that there is another opinion here.
Also, while you're having your catharsis, you can check out marvelmythos.com. They're available pretty much wherever you can find podcasts. They are more of like a book club for Marvel Comics. It's a situation where their show is to take an arc or a particular storyline and then just break it down character-wise. The language is safe for work, so you don't have to worry about offending anyone who's around. And they do, I think, a pretty solid job of covering the different storylines of the characters. They did the round robin Spider-Man storyline, which I happen to have all the issues of because it features Moon Knight, and one of Moon Knight's adversaries, Midnight, is one of the integral, I guess, villains in that storyline. And I have all of the issues signed by Mark Bagley and one or two other folks. So it's not a situation that I have all the creators signed it, but I'm about halfway there.
And to our new listeners, welcome. If you're wondering why anyone would care about Moon Knight, you can check out our episode involving that character.
I think it was issue number 4, I think, was Moon Knight. 4 or 5. It was definitely one of the first 5. I remember that. So you have to go all the way back through our archives on Google Play, iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, YouTube, iHeartRadio, or Spotify. Again, we cover pretty much everywhere, any of the major areas in which you can find podcasts. We are there. So please check us out. Give us a like, subscribe, review, rating, whatever the opportunities are available for you there. And if you want to be like Brian and you can subscribe to our show through Patreon, it's patreon.com/capes on the couch. You can join at the $1, $3, $5, and $10 levels. So $1 gets you a shout out, and we give a big shout out and thank you to all of our subscribers. $3 gets you early access and availability to download a monthly blooper reel. $5 gets you a longer uncensored version of the skit at the end of every episode, plus guaranteed that any questions you have will be answered by us about all of our pending upcoming episodes. And the $10 level means that you get to pick one character a month, and we will do that character and answer any questions that you have. So we still have one $10 slot available if you are so interested, or you can just subscribe at a lower level, and we'll still appreciate the support that you show to independent media, because that's what it's all about.
Amen to that.
And on that note, we are going to get started and delve right into Wolverine. And we are going to gloss over this. As longtime listeners of the show know, we don't go fully into the weeds on every single storyline because that's not the point of this show. We try to just provide some sort of an overview to the character and the issues, if you will, pardon pun, that they've been in and the storylines that they've been involved in. For someone like Wolverine, this was particularly difficult to try and parse it down into 5 to 7 minutes of a background.
Yeah, your podcast player is definitely going to thank us. Otherwise, this would clock in. My estimate would be about 16, 17 hours.
Yeah, and that's probably at 1 1/4 speed. So Wolverine was created by Roy Thomas, Len Wein, and John Romita Sr. and drawn by Herb Trimpe in the Incredible Hulk number 180 and then 181 in October and November of 1974. And there is some argument. The reason why I put that in there, I see the quizzical expression on your face, because Wolverine shows up in 180 in the last panel on the last page. And so there is some dispute amongst diehard fans as to whether that's his true debut or whether it's 181 in which he is on the cover and the entire story is about Wolverine battling the Hulk. So that's the only reason why I included that in there. I didn't want to upset anyone who has any preference on if you're on the 180 or on the 181 side. I'm just trying to make everybody happy.
So I'm in 180. It's 180. That's why I had the look on my face. I'm like, why is that such a big deal?
I agree, but if you just get 180, he's literally in there for a panel. And then the story that he's in is in 181. So that's
okay.
Listen, again, I'm trying to be nice to people. So originally, he was just introduced as an agent of the Canadian government, and he was known as Weapon X, and he was tasked with taking down the Hulk. And originally, reading the story again this morning before we started, while I was writing this, the background, he said, "Moving is the thing I do best."
I'm so glad that didn't catch on. That is such a bad catchphrase.
Yeah, it was basically a situation where he's battling the Hulk and also the Wendigo, and he's fighting both of them, and they are obviously way bigger than him, and it's made reference numerous times that he's 5'5" and he's not that big of a guy, but he's trying to just stick and move in a battle with the Hulk. And, you know, it works out well for him, but he's a little chattier, I think, than some of the later characters or characterizations are of him.
I almost feel like this is a Boba Fett situation where you have a character that clearly is getting some traction and gets taken in a different direction because it just becomes overwhelmingly popular and you can't just ignore him, you know, like too good to ignore.
Well, the difference is that Wolverine is a great character and that Boba Fett is a joke.
Are you just trying to spark interest? Are you really becoming that type of Twitter troll now?
No, I'm seriously, I'm not trying to inject these hot takes. I'm not Stephen A. Smith. I'm not trying to just, you know, throw in these hot takes and compare Boba Fett to a joke character, even though he is. That's a whole other thing, really. I don't want to get. I'll rephrase that. Boba Fett he's not a joke character. He's just incredibly overhyped for what he is in canon and that we see on the movies. But I digress. So
you would say he's not the best at what he does?
No. Boba Fett is definitely not the best at what he does. I would put him at maybe like a 60% rank. He's mid-range at what he does.
Okay.
So in any event, Wolverine, who at one point was rumored to possibly have the background, or it was indicated that he would be a mutated Wolverine cub who was somehow turned into a man, or there was another discussion about that the High Evolutionary would be involved in his backstory. None of this came to pass. It was just that he's just a really short, pissed off guy. But he was introduced as a member of the new X-Men team in 1975's Giant Size X-Men #1, which is one of the integral episodes or issues in X-Men history. And that led to the introduction of several of the characters that we know and love: Storm, Nightcrawler, Colossus, etc. So Wolverine becomes attracted to Jean Grey, Cyclops' girlfriend at the time, because they're part of the original X-Men team. And we covered Scott in our Scott is a Dick episode.
Oh,
and
why? Every time. Why?
I think I'm contractually obligated to say it at this point.
Oh.
So he goes, the team goes to Japan as part of a mission, and he meets Lady Mariko Yashida, and he falls in love with her. And then shortly thereafter, he has to evade Alpha Flight, a division of the Canadian government Department H, who have to bring him in because the Canadian government spent considerable time and money developing Wolverine and giving him all of his skills, the adamantium claws and so on and so forth. On a side note, by the way, again, we're really not going to delve that much into the creation of Wolverine, because if you're listening to this episode, I'm going to bet there's a 99% chance you've seen at least one of the X-Men movies and are familiar with who Wolverine is. So I'm not going to belabor those points too much. It's like, just like every Batman movie doesn't need to show Thomas and Martha Wayne getting shot, every Spider-Man movie doesn't need to show Uncle Ben dying. We know. Just move on and tell the good story. That's what we're doing here. So he goes back to Japan, and this is in the iconic Frank Miller Wolverine story, that miniseries. This is all part of that, where he goes back to Japan and he becomes engaged to Mariko, but he has to break it off because her family is connected to the Yakuza. So that was told somewhat based on that series was the Wolverine, not the X-Men Origins Wolverine story, but the Wolverine was loosely based on that Frank Miller storyline. They took enough of it that you go, okay, I can see where they borrowed a lot of that, which is, again, why I think it wasn't that bad of a film, because it certainly was a better Wolverine movie than Origins. That was just a piece of hot shit.
Wow.
It was. The effects were garbage. The acting was garbage, and you don't sew Deadpool's mouth shut.
I didn't enjoy it. I thought that there were many things they glossed over and just butchered, but I don't know. I guess I just don't take it to your level. I don't know what to say.
Listen, I feel or I don't feel. There's very little in between. You know this about me. I am Billy Joel. I go to extremes. This is what I do. So then he takes Kitty Pryde under his wing and he becomes a foster father of sorts to Kitty Pryde. And I don't know if he's the one who gives her the nickname Shadow Cat or she comes up with the nickname Shadow Cat, but it's while she's with Wolverine that she becomes Shadow Cat as opposed to Ariel or Sprite, the other nicknames that she had. He's instrumental in developing her and growing her as a character. So then much later on, he has his adamantium claws forcibly ripped out of his body by Magneto. All of the adamantium in his body, not just the claws, all of the adamantium in his body is removed by Magneto, like through his skin. He just sort of pulls all the metal out of his body because he is Eric Lenscher, he is Magneto, and he is a bad dude.
Yeah. That has to be pretty painful. If anyone's ever had to donate bone marrow or something like that, it's one of the worst experiences you can have, even if it's for a great cause. So imagine that, except your entire skeletal system.
Exactly. I think the bone marrow is a very good analogy to make with that. And I would say, yeah, except 1,000 times more painful. So once the adamantium is removed, that's when it's revealed that his claws are originally bone, and also having the adamantium ripped out of his body severely short-circuited his healing factor. So he can heal, but it's going to take a long, long time, and it's not going to be as perfect as it was. So then he gets kidnapped and driven insane by Genesis, who's the son of Cable, and I'm not going to get into that. He gets driven insane by Genesis because he's attempting to rebond the adamantium to his skeleton, and it doesn't take, and as a result, the healing factor then creates a more feral version of Wolverine. So now he is base instinct personified, and he is dangerous.
I always wondered about this when I first read this storyline. Is there the equivalent of anti-rejection drugs, like when we get skin grafts or transplants, things like that? We're talking just straight up metal. How do you plan for that? That's ridiculous.
Well, there was no planning. It was just he's going to use his healing factor and that's going to fix it. So we don't have to worry about the anti-rejection medication. So he gets successfully rebonded by Apocalypse, of all people.
Oh, who knew that Apocalypse was that nice a guy?
Yeah, except he also turns him into the Horseman Death for a time. He figures, I'm going to give you the skeleton, I'm going to give you your adamantium claws back, but you work for me now.
So he takes someone that's able to basically regenerate himself in terms of life and calls him Death? Nice.
Yeah, no shortage of irony there. So finally, some 30 years after his initial introduction, we finally get the origin of Wolverine. Stories about his past had been hinted at from time to time. There was a whole thing where he didn't really know what his history was, and that was done very well in the X-Men movies, but he didn't really know his backstory. He had amnesia due to all the trauma that he had gone through as a result of all the experimentation. So he didn't know, or he didn't remember what his past was, and they didn't tell us, the readers. So finally, in 2002, we get the origin. He is born James Howlett in the late 1800s in Canada, and his father's a plantation owner. And after seeing his father killed by the groundskeeper Thomas Logan, James's claws, the bone claws, appear for the first time, and he kills Logan, who's later implied to be his biological father.
I apologize. I just want to point out, this story was done incredibly well because you did not see it coming when Wolverine acted this way. You thought that he was the groundskeeper's son as portrayed because they kind of do the narrative by that person's side. And you're thinking, oh, wow, abusive father, no wonder he's as gruff as he is, et cetera, et cetera. Except he turns out to be this very meek, well-coddled little kid that had everything in the world. But once he saw his family attacked, he just totally lost it. And it's like, oh, that's what those claws are. And wow, that was the completely different character than I expected. Good job.
So James goes on the run with an orphan girl named Rose, and she's the one who gives him the name Logan. And then he accidentally kills Rose while he's fighting his half-brother Dog, who is Thomas Logan's son.
Right. I can't imagine being that young, going through these things so quickly. And then rather than having the typical lifetime arc of dealing with these things, you get it extended and you get amnesia because of the experiments that people do on you, and you become a killing machine. And that's too much. That's just ridiculous.
So we later discover that he fought alongside Captain America in World War II. And so I was really hoping that when they were in the beginning of the X-Men Origins Wolverine, when they're showing him and Sabretooth going through history and fighting side by side in all the wars, I was like, man, World War II, can you show us Captain America somewhere? I know Fox didn't have the rights, but maybe just like a shield somewhere. No, it wasn't going to happen. Well, it's going to happen now because Disney's buying Fox. So then X-23 is revealed as a female clone / daughter. Laura Kinney, she is basically raised she's raised as an assassin, but she is a female genetic clone of Logan with the claws, and she's got 2 claws in her hands and then 2 claws coming out of her feet. This was done. She was done in the Logan movie. Amazing job by Daphne Keane, the young girl portraying Laura / X-23. She was never, I think, officially named X-23 in the movie. She was just sort of like the 23rd attempt at cloning Logan. And we'll just leave it that little tidbit for you comic book fans. So in 2005, Wolverine joins the new Avengers. It was a big deal because previously Captain America had said that Logan was too violent and too much of a bloodthirsty killer to join the Avengers. So this was under Bendis's run. He joins the team along with Luke Cage and a number of other heroes. So during the House of M storyline, Logan is one of the few mutants who remembers the way the world was before Wanda said no more mutants and changed everything. And he is instrumental in using the young mutant Layla Miller to turn things back the way they were. So then he discovers he has a son, Dakin, who he has a very difficult relationship with. They eventually improve it, but it does not start off positive at all.
That's an understatement.
Then in the Schism storyline, this had been building for quite some time. There was some issues in the relationship between Cyclops and Wolverine over the path of the X-Men. And then eventually it leads to a big fight between Scott and Logan. And Logan leaves and starts a new school as the headmaster, and he calls it the Jean Grey School. And you know that was just done as a giant middle finger to Scott.
Yeah, that's a pretty sick burn. Just the idea that you're going to take someone's previous wife and name your school after them. That's beautiful.
Yeah, that's a giant middle finger, but Scott deserves it. So then in the Avengers versus X-Men storyline, now it's just a running joke. Now whether or not it's warranted, I'm just going to mention that Scott is a dick. And I know that's going to upset some of the fans of Scott, and I know it has in the past, but it's just such a joke at this point.
And I'm so complacent. I know. I need to stick up for him more, okay? He's awesome. Cyclops, you're the man.
So in the AVX storyline, he signs with the Avengers and he turns against the X-Men because he realizes that Scott's being a dick. And also because he wants to take Hope Summers into custody to protect her from the Phoenix Force. I think that was done largely because Wolverine remembered what happened to Jean and he did not want that to happen to Hope.
Right. Yeah. Legitimate point.
Yeah, and I think, frankly, that he showed more concern for her than Scott did. Scott was just, let the Phoenix Force come. Let it take over my granddaughter from an alternate dimension. So, she can...
Well, he thought it was going to be the saving grace of his whole mutant kind. That's something that you would kind of welcome, I would think.
Yes, except he was blatantly ignoring all the previous times the Phoenix Force had come to Earth and not been a saving grace for anyone, but I digress. So he joins the Avengers Unity Squad with Havoc and Rogue, and that was actually a pretty cool book, the Uncanny Avengers. I think that was Remender that wrote that particular run. I enjoyed that. Then it was the death of Wolverine. We finally got around to that. I think that was Charles Soule and Steve McNiven were working on that, were the team.
Mm-hmm.
He dies as a result of his healing factor being shut off from a virus, and then he suffocates in adamantium.
Couldn't they have just said heavy metal poisoning? I mean, suffocating under adamantium. Okay, whatever.
So he dies on his knees and gets turned into what almost looks like an adamantium statue version of Wolverine because he's just drowning in it. Mm. And though in the past couple of months, Wolverine has returned. I know you're shocked that they would kill such an important character, but then bring him back. But we don't quite know exactly how he's been resurrected yet. That is one of the mysteries. So I guess you'll just have to buy Marvel Comics and find out how Wolverine came back. How Logan got his groove back, I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah, I went there.
Fine. Well, I mean, it's better than trying to read Ultimate Marvel when he gets ripped in half by the Hulk and he's left on a mountain trying to gather his other parts, and we never found out what happened because that got delayed for 2.5 years in production because they just couldn't get, a consistent writer and artist to get on the book. But it's not like they ever leave Logan just hanging there doing nothing. They're gonna finish that. I'm sure a lot of fans know what I'm talking about with this.
Oh, yeah. I remember the Ultimate Hulk and Ultimate Wolverine situation. I really wanted to know what was going on there, and it took for...
If they tie it in with this, I'm going to laugh.
So let's move on to the issues. And for a character that's as long-standing and iconic as Logan, James Howlett, Wolverine, whatever name you want to give him, we're going to go beyond just the normal 3. Normally we just do 3 issues. Wolverine has a host of problems, so we're not going to get into every single issue that he's got. But let's start with the first one that I want to talk about. Is he's got this sense of honor, and this is very tied in and integral to the Frank Miller miniseries. The sense of honor, Bushido, the Japanese, the samurai. He was given the Masamune sword that was part of the Yashida clan. He was given that sword because he was very honorable in the way that he was defending Mariko. And so there's that sense of honor. And I think it plays well with his pragmatism as a fighter. Wolverine is, as we learned, as he said in the Miller series, he is the best at what he does, but what he does isn't very nice. And he will kill you. Wolverine has no compunctions about killing a villain if he thinks it's going to ultimately resolve the problem. He's not a Frank Castle bloodthirsty killer, but he will take you out if it comes down to it. Doc, how do you reconcile that sense of honor and about fighting and the way you carry yourself with this, I will kill you and I will take you down if I have to? Is there a way to reconcile that? And if so, how?
Well, even the sense of honor from that standpoint starts with the idea that you don't start a fight. If you're in a peaceful situation, then you let it be. If someone confronts you, then in all honesty, it's not just traditional sense of honor, but it has to do with how society is now formatted. You do everything you can to find nonviolent ways to de-escalate situations. We do this on a daily basis. If you disagree with someone, your first compunction should not be to punch them in the face. You may have that idea way, way in the back of your mind, but you don't act on it. However, if someone takes a swing at you, all bets are off. That's something that I think everyone can relate to. Wolverine takes that to the highest level because he has to. It's a comic series, so there's going to be lots of action. In addition to that, he is able to demonstrate consistency in his fighting. What I mean by that is you don't get to be such an excellent weapon. I'm sorry, I hate that idea that he's depersonalized like that.
I'm just laughing at the pun, whether or not you intended the excellent weapon. Weapon X. You meant it. I know. I really did. I'm sorry.
Okay, so to get back to the point, you don't get that way without lots of training, with lots of dedication, and doing it every day, over and over, regardless of if there's a threat or not. He was always aware. He was a good trained soldier. Discipline can be freedom because it allows your brain to focus on other things. For example, we all have our automatic things that we do. We all know we're breathing. We all know that at some points we have to eat. We all know that our bodies are still functioning, our heart is beating, but we don't have to think about those things. If you can take certain physical practices and do them repeatedly to the point that they become habits and routines that you don't have to put extra mental energy into, it allows you to focus on the other things. Wolverine doesn't focus on how he's throwing a punch or avoiding a kick or whatever. He's just simply thinking now, how on earth am I going to take this mystical samurai guy down and make sure that he doesn't destroy an entire village or leave my wife for dead or anything like that. He's actually thinking of the big important stuff rather than the minutiae of a fight. And it's because he's become so good at what he does. It's a real cool situation to be in. In a way, I can relate to that, not from a fighting stance at all. I can relate to it because when we do our residency training, at this point, when nurses call me for certain orders, I know exactly what I'm ordering already, and I already have my fingers typing on the keys without even giving it a second thought. In the meantime, I'm also going over, what did my wife tell me to do tonight in terms of like doing the laundry or running the dishwasher and stuff. The other thing that I mentioned about, putting in orders, that's incredibly important. And there was a time where I would really struggle with that. I had to write it out over and over and over again. But that rote routine allowed me to put it, quote unquote, on autopilot. It's not totally on autopilot. I have to make sure I'm doing the right thing. But the amount of effort it takes is a lot less. With Wolverine, once again, as we've seen with other characters, he's had the opportunity to hone his craft for decades. So all of that becomes incredibly simple. So he doesn't even have to worry about making those types of baseline decisions. He's seen these situations play out in so many occasions that he can just go to whatever's worked in the past or whatever variation he knows has, done well for him and not even have to think about it. But that also gives him the opportunity before those things ever get to that point of someone getting hurt. What could he do ahead of time? Is there a way that he is not exactly eloquent, but is there a way that he could avoid that situation altogether? Should they just move to a different spot? Should they just put a show of force in the sense that, hey, I'm a big bad guy with claws. Do you really want to mess with me? And for the most part, that can work. But since we're talking about comics, they still fight him. So I think it's just the nature of him willing to put in that effort, put in that time and energy to learn things so well and keep the type of discipline that's expected for someone who, as it's been said, has honor, that all of that is just ingrained in him. And since it's so rote, both the muscle memory and the systems that he uses intellectually, that anything else becomes a very simple problem. Either you deal with it that way or you don't. Not really putting that much effort into it. I mean, it's a great, tremendous effort overall, but the baseline stuff he's got down totally pat.
Cool. I definitely understand the notion of operating on autopilot and being so comfortable with what it is that you're doing that you don't have to think about it. And the problem then, I think, at least for me personally, comes from when I do my job on autopilot, that it gives my brain time to think about other things that I don't necessarily need to be thinking about. And it's idle mind is a devil's playground type thing where, because I'm so bored at work that I could just do my brain while operating on autopilot, that I start getting intrusive thoughts, or I start second guessing myself. Not even necessarily that I'm second guessing my work product or things that I'm doing at work. I could just be having a perfectly normal day and this thought will pop in. But because my brain doesn't have a job to focus on, it goes, let me take this and just run with it for about 3 hours and see what happens. And then by the end of it, I'm in a completely different mental state because my brain has taken this horrible idea that I should have just said, well, that's ridiculous. But because I let it stew for a while, it causes problems. So I don't know if that happens to anyone else, but you are certainly not alone if your brain just interjects with, hey, remember this embarrassing thing that happened to you in 6th grade? Let's replay that in your mind 20 times over. And then you just go, I just need to get rid of it in my head. So that's why my thing is actually, I will literally shake my head like an Etch-a-Sketch. And I don't know if I mentioned this in the show before, but I will literally shake my head like an Etch-a-Sketch if I get an intrusive thought, because for me, that's just my physiological response to getting a thought that pops in my head that I don't want to think about repeatedly. And most of the time it works. So it's just, I don't like shake it vigorously. It's just like like I just get a shudder and I just get a quick little head shake. And then usually I will intentionally try and think of something positive that's just happened, or literally anything other than that, just to give my brain a new train of thought. But it's very difficult sometimes because my brain just goes, no, let's stick with this for a bit. So I certainly understand the notion of operating on just rote history and giving your brain time to focus and think about other things.
Yeah, because when you talk about a code of honor or anything, that's what it is. It's literally a code. This is what you do under these circumstances and what you're always supposed to do consistently. So once you have that down, everything becomes simplified. I appreciate what you just described because I know I go through that too. Absolutely go through that. At the same time, that gives you an opportunity then to recognize, can you improve on your code? Just because something has been that way for a long period of time doesn't mean it can't be revised. So,
I know. I absolutely agree. So moving into the next issue, this was something that, like I said, has been was such an integral part of Logan for decades, this uncertainty over his history. And now we obviously, as the readers, didn't find out about this until 2002, but to some extent he had bits and pieces of his history that were referenced before. So we knew some of his story, and also he had addressed some things prior to this. But that uncertainty for so long, for decades, and I mean, we're literally talking decades because he was born in the 1800s, that kind of distanced him from people because he didn't really know who he was. He didn't know what he was. He didn't know what he wanted. And because of everything that he had been through over the decades and perhaps a century or more, he didn't have a strong connection with anyone. I'll bring it to a quote from the Captain America Winter Soldier. I'm 95. It's hard to find someone with shared life experience. It's difficult for people in the comics who have those long lives, and we've talked about this with Vandal Savage and Raish and so on, that have been around for extended periods of time. There's not that connection there. Or if you do have that connection, it's not close because you know that you'll still be around and they'll be gone. So that creates this distance between him and people, and we'll touch on his other relationships in a moment, and we'll get to that. But in terms of platonic friendships and even teams, it's very difficult for Logan to be a functioning member of a team because of all that. So, Doc, if you can explain and elaborate a little bit on that.
Sure. The first thing that you mentioned regarding similarities to Vandal Savage and Ra's al Ghul, I think are quite apropos. The thing I'll say that is different is if they want to relate to people now, those two are usually either downplaying or outright lying about their history. Basic question. Hey, so what do you do? They may make up something that's more current. Vandal Savage probably would say something like, oh, I'm a mover and a shaker, man. Like just to try and ingratiate himself, as opposed to Ra's al Ghul probably saying like, I'm trying to make the planet green again, as we've stated before. But the thing that Wolverine would have a problem with is he would have to say, well, I've done some things, but I don't quite know. It puts him on the spot as much as the person that he's talking to, because there's this gray area. There's only so much that he can say about what's happened before, so there's not as much to go on, even though he has decades of experience in other ways. People, in general, like to hear a backstory. Heck, that's partly why we read a lot of comics. That's why certain movies have become so popular as franchises, because they create these iconic characters and we want to know more about them. That's true for humanity as a whole. We want to know what's happened to people in their lives that made them who they are and how they're going to change in the future. When Logan doesn't have that, he gets stuck. He has to improvise. To take it back to one of my favorite characters, the Joker, his life becomes multiple choice. The fact that they did the origin story the way they did, it gave us the feedback as to how things happened, and Logan was able to piece those things together later on. But basically, without that initial human connection, it becomes difficult to see how you've grown, how you've changed. For example, some people that are adopted never know their biological families. They may have traits that their foster parents or adoptive parents may say, oh, that must be so-and-so, like that must be your mother or that must be your father, but they don't know. So then it becomes an issue of, well, did I just learn this from my environment, or is this something that I was genetically predisposed to, or how would I find out? Some people agonize over the idea of not knowing, for example, who their siblings are or who their parents are. Some people genuinely, after traumatic events, and Wolverine, if you really want to say he had traumatic events, I think it qualifies, they don't get the memories around that situation back. And so they may have nightmares or flashbacks to bits and pieces of terrible things that have happened to them, but they don't know the whole story. And unless someone else was there to witness it, then they don't have what we would call a reliable narrator. So I'll take it to a very horrible place, but it's the truth. If someone, for example, is under the influence of a substance, ends up with an unfortunate sexual assault where they were raped, then if no one else was around and they know something bad happened, they go to the hospital, and I've seen this happen, they can't give you details. So then it becomes, well, how do you pursue it? Do you know anything about the attacker? I don't remember. Do you know anything about the circumstances? Well, I remember where I was. And it becomes a situation where we try and get them as much mental health attention as we can provide, but we can't do anything from a legal standpoint. We try and reach out to people that may know the person, and we hope for the best. I don't mean to make that sound flippant. It's not. It's a serious situation that doesn't have a smooth resolution. Now, space that out for quite a few decades of your life, and you've got Wolverine.
I think the sexual assault analogy is apropos, particularly in light of the Me Too movement and the cultural change and shifts that we're undergoing these days. So I think that's a very apropos analogy. But particularly, as you said, if you take that and extrapolate it out over decades, and that's what happens with Wolverine. So that certainly explains why he would be withdrawn and really unable to trust people. But we know that he is able to find a lasting relationship with at least two women, Jean Grey and Mariko Yashida. They are very different women, and they are very different relationships, but they both bring Logan a sense of peace and happiness. And I think most importantly, a knowledge and a feeling and a belief that he is loved, that it's not just a one-sided thing, that Logan and Jean, for all the issues that relationship has, Logan felt loved, and he knew that Jean truly cared for him. Now, in what manner? That depended on Scott's involvement in the picture, but Logan felt cared for by Jean. Mariko was definitely more, I would say, of an even footing in that it was just more of a straightforward love. But the fact remains that he still had these relationships with these two women, and they're very different relationships and very different women, but that they were able to love him for who he was. Outside of that, we haven't seen Logan really have anybody. So if you want to just take that and just talk about that for a few minutes.
Sure. Between Logan and Jean, I think that's an example of, from a romantic standpoint, an almost unrequited love. Not quite at that point, because, as you said, Jean did time and time again demonstrate that she had affection for him, much more on the platonic level than Logan would have liked. Sometimes it's been portrayed as Logan completely ignoring that and going to the point of saying, well, I love you so much that ultimately you will love me. And that's actually a pretty common way that it's presented in literature as a whole, in movies, sometimes with a positive spin, sometimes with a more devious spin. But either way, the point still stands. And you said it very well. It's not equal footing. When that happens, there is going to be a push. And that means either this is going to ultimately get resolved, in which case the person is going to make a decision, meaning in this case, I mean Jean Grey making a decision one way or the other. And there's going to be a fallout with the, I'm going to say unfortunate soul, because for the most part, it doesn't work that way where you wear the person down. Anybody that's seen, I can't believe I'm referencing this. Anybody that's seen the show Family Matters with Urkel, I'm wearing you down. You know, like basically,
wow.
Hey, seriously.
And did you do that?
The way that he pursued Laura for years and years, and it didn't matter. And ironically, near the end of the show's run, he did get a girlfriend because she was really intelligent and didn't have to focus on Laura so much, but still had that type of feeling. You know, that really is a good parallel here, I think.
Didn't he end up with Laura, though, at the very end?
It was such
Or was that when he split off and became Stefano Kel?
Right.
God, that show is so stupid.
But the point still stands that the idea that you're just going to continue to pursue someone when they clearly have other agendas, it's going to lead to usually resentment, to a feeling of being beyond disrespected. You feel like you're being thrown away. That's not the case. That's not the reality, but that's the way the person feels.
Well, there are so many romantic comedies in general where the guy goes after the girl who doesn't want him, and he makes these big, giant romantic gestures, even though she's likely with someone, and he's like, "Oh, they're not right for you. I'm the one who's right for you." If those movies were authentically realistic, she would have restraining orders against him. Usually, he would be shunned or blocked. Authorities would be sent after him. Like, this is not a romantic thing. And that warps, honestly, we could go into a whole side tangent about how this impacts the way that men treat women in general and toxic masculinity, etc. But I think it's definitely those types of stories are both a symptom and a cause of toxic masculinity, because they breed this notion that if only I pursue her harder, and if this doesn't work, well, then I'll just try this tactic, and I'll just try this tactic. How about no? How about you just say, oh, she doesn't want to be with me? All right, I'm just going to move on. Because I'll be the first one to admit, there have been times in my much, much younger days where I pursued a girl who wasn't particularly interested in me. And I just thought, oh, well, I just haven't found the right way to woo her. I never respected her agency to make the decision for herself that, no, I don't like you in that way. We can just be friends. The whole notion of a friend zone, I think, is toxic masculinity in and of itself. There are so many problems I have with that and the whole notion. I hate to go off on this tangent, but it's just, I think it's related to this notion that, you know, Wolverine, and particularly in that triangle with Jean and Scott, they were happy. And then Wolverine comes in and goes, oh, no, you don't want to be with him. You want to be with the bad boy. You want to be with me. And because the comics are written by men, they had Jean go, well, maybe kind of whatever. And I'm almost willing to guarantee you, if those comics back in the day had been written by a woman, Scott and Jean would be married, and Logan probably wouldn't even have been invited because he would have been shunned by the rest of the X-Men.
And it's fascinating that you called that a tangent. It's not a tangent. I think it's directly germane to the topic.
Well, my point is just that I could have gone on a tangent about the toxic masculinity, etc. I brought it back to the topic, but I could just go on for another 20 minutes on the issues with the portrayal of men pursuing, you know, like Wedding Crashers. Owen Wilson's entire story arc is just ridiculous.
Right.
I agree that, you know, they made Bradley Cooper out to be a dick, but still.
Right. So for anybody that was expecting me to totally say that Logan should have been with Jean and that's the way it should have ended, I'm sorry. I guess there's going to be a different expectation from now on. And I'm going to juxtapose that directly with Mariko because I think that was beautiful. I think it was excellent because you said it better than I could. She took him for who he was. This is a man that is willing. Oh my God. See, this is how our brains work. She was willing to go with the man who will fight for her honor. He'll be...
No. I'm not singing it. I love that song, but you are not getting me to sing Peter Cetera. Please, just...
Okay. Then I will stop there. But the point stands.
I'll still put the link in the page
but
to the music video.
It still stands, though, that his demonstration of love was not this idea of, oh, I need to show that I'm better than everyone else. It was, you are incredibly valuable as a person. And because you mean a lot to me, I want to make sure that you have what's available in the world to you, that you have every opportunity to be who you are, and that if there is a threat to us, then I will make sure that things get resolved. That is something that I think every partner should strive for. And I know, for example, I am not perfect with this. My wife will attest to that. But there's no such thing as a 50-50 relationship. It's 100-100. Everyone is giving of themselves for the other person and vice versa.
See, now we have an expression that we've been using in my family, that a marriage, a true solid marriage, it's not 50-50. I agree with you, but we never say it's 100-100. We say every marriage is 60-40. Now, the difference is who is the 60 and who is the 40 flip-flops depending on the situation, because you can never have a situation. It's impossible, and it is draining to have a relationship in which it is completely 50-50. There's always going to be 60-40. Sometimes it's even 70-30. But the point is, there is always going to be a scenario in which someone is giving more and someone is taking more. The key is to flip it and to make it situational so that one person isn't always giving more and one person isn't always taking more. And I know that I strive for that in my marriage, that there are times when my wife needs a lot of things from me, and she just, for time or whatever energy purposes, she can't give as much. And then vice versa, that my wife is incredibly giving, and I say to her, I don't deserve you because I just feel like I'm not doing enough to warrant this attention or this appreciation or affection, what have you. And she says, don't be silly. So it's in the eye of the beholder, so to speak. But the notion that there's always going to be someone who's going to be giving just a little bit more and taking a little bit more. But as long as the person who is doing the taking is appreciative, at least from my perspective, I think that makes it a lot better and a lot easier to handle. If I know that I'm giving and giving and giving, but my wife, God bless her, is very appreciative and she's always very grateful for all the things that I do for her, and vice versa. If my wife is giving and giving and giving, I am always the first to say, thank you. I appreciate this. Thank you so much. I love you, and etc. That's the key. So for Logan and Mariko, I think it's a scenario where they were both giving of different things, but it was a scenario where ultimately they both realized it wasn't going to work in the long term because they needed things from the other that they weren't able to give. And Logan couldn't stop being an X-Man, and Mariko couldn't completely shut off her family.
Right.
So,
and recognizing that, even though it causes the short-term pain and the long-term, I don't want to say agony, it's not that far, but just, the longing, the idea that you're going to still want to be with that person, even though it's not going to work out, and still have the respect to end the relationship rather than dragging it out, I think is an impressive thing. On both sides. It's
absolutely a sign of maturity. And from a relationship standpoint, I think it's we'll bring it back to the word honorable. It's an honorable and respectful thing to do, to say, you know what, this isn't going to work. And I'm not going to force myself to stay in this situation just because of these past feelings that we had and whatever we have. You can't always view your relationship in terms of the past. You have to look at it in terms of the present and the future as well. And I think a lot of people get hung up on the past and, well, we had this great thing, even though that's not who we currently are as people nowadays. Now, that's not necessarily to say that you have to break up with someone or you have to end the relationship, but it does force you to examine it. You have to be honest and you have to be open about that. So I think that's a very important thing. And that's why I will always, I hate using this word, but I will ship Wolverine and Mariko way faster than I will ship Wolverine and Jean Grey.
Okay.
I think everyone should just leave Scott alone because he's a dick. So now contrasting, the relationships between Jean and Mariko. Now let's move on to his children. And we're going to talk about, he has got three very different types of children. There's the biological son, Dakin. There's the clone daughter, Laura /X23. And there's his foster, quote unquote, daughter, Kitty Pryde. He has three very different relationships with them. And I find it interesting that of the three, the best relationship that he has is the one with the only one who has no genetic connection to him whatsoever. And that's Kitty Pryde.
That's a fascinating point. I think the reason why Kitty worked out so well for him as a relationship is he recognized a certain level of innocence with her and everything that she was going through, as well as the natural potential. And we discussed this with the Green Goblin, between him and Harry versus him and Peter Parker. But the point still stands. When you have the opportunity to mold someone, in other words, they're in your situation, maybe not even by choice, but fully well, compared to someone that's been thrust upon you with no choice whatsoever, or you find out in a way that you didn't, that you're a father. Just saying.
Maury Povich.
The initial attitude is going to be much different. So, hey, you got someone that's based on your genetic material, and it's all lab-based, and it wasn't IVF or something like that. Like, it wasn't like you were really a part of that deal. You're not always going to have a great feeling about it. But if you recognize that that person is trying to do positive things, okay, I can give it a shot. On the other hand, if you have someone where they say, hey, you are the father, and forget whether or not what you do is not very nice, what your offspring's doing might be just downright evil, well, I'm not sure I want to go that route. I'm not, and by the way, I am not in any way advocating deadbeat dads, okay? I just want to make it clear that under different circumstances, different people are going to feel different things. But Kitty Pryde, in this case, is in an environment that, first of all, Logan wants to be in, because he wants to be involved in the X-Men. He wants to do good for the world. She wants to do good for the world. She just doesn't know how. He has plenty of experience when it comes to fighting. And yet, even then, that's not really what his role is. His role is more like, hey, kid, I'm going to be your motivator. I'm going to make sure that if you are down on something or you feel like you aren't capable of doing something, I'll be your motivator. I'll be your coach. And that's okay.
He'll be her mirror man.
Good job. Good reference. But that's exactly it.
Kitty, when's the last time you did something for the first time? I want your best, not your fake best, not your settled best, your authentic best.
Wow. For those that don't know what Anthony is talking about.
If you've ever done a Tough Mudder and you've had Sean Corvelle give you the speech before you go through the entry gate, by the time you get done, you are willing to run through a goddamn mountain for Sean. Not over a mountain, not across it, not up it. You're willing to run through the mountain for Sean Corvelle. That's how incredible of a speaker and a hype man he is. And he will say himself, I'm not your hype man. I'm not your personal motivator. I'm your mirror man. All I'm doing is showing you what you're capable of.
Right. And Wolverine is able to take that stance with Kitty Pryde because there's a different expectation. That's what he was molded to do in that circumstance, as opposed to, let's see, a genetic clone that pretty much is supposed to be a fighting machine, and Wolverine was a fighting machine, so okay, and an antagonistic son that, could eviscerate people, and Wolverine is Weapon X. So, in other words, if that's the route that they wanted those people to go even before he got involved, then what did you expect to happen? He's going to have a limited influence, as opposed to someone like Kitty Pryde, who is coming in with the assumption that the people around her are going to be doing uplifting and motivating things, and he's already a part of that. So he doesn't have to have that other side, that other vicious, physical, aggressive nature that everyone else had to see for decades. So he got the opportunity to show the other part that is just as powerful, but he didn't have to do it with someone that was expecting a fight, like a physical fight. Because even if he wanted to be that way with the other two, would it have really gone that well? I'm not so sure.
I don't know either. I mean, Dakin can definitely hold his own, and Laura, especially if she gets that trigger scent, she just becomes a feral, unstoppable monster. So there's definitely something there for that. The last thing we're going to talk about, and a lot of this, I'm just realizing, of course, this now, I'm realizing after we wrote this, so much of what we're talking about with Logan's issues deal with his relationships with people, whether it's his romantic relationships, and then we talk about his familial relationships. Now we're going to talk about his interpersonal relationship with Scott.
Scott is a good man. Scott is a good man. Don't say it again.
His battles with Cyclops over both Jean and the direction of the team have been iconic and integral to the storytelling of X-Men arcs for decades. Why is it that these two men are at such loggerheads consistently about this? And particularly with respect to Logan, what is it about Scott that irks him so much? Because he has said on numerous occasions that he respects Scott and his leadership abilities. And there was that one during Whedon's run when he clears the Sentinels off the lawn, and he said, you know, every once and again I'm reminded why you're the leader of this team. So he respects Scott. He just doesn't necessarily like him, but that still makes for a tense dynamic. I guess just I don't know what the question would be, but because it definitely makes for a tense dynamic. So I don't know if you have thoughts on that or what you want to say. The other thing I forgot to mention, especially after Xavier's death, which Scott is responsible for, and we talk on that in the Scott episode, they have different ideas as to how to carry on Xavier's legacy.
Yeah,
because that's the one thing that we really didn't talk about is the Logan Xavier relationship, but they both have very different ideas as to how to move forward and progress with the legacy of Charles Xavier. What causes those differences?
Well, first of all, to address the notion that we're not talking about Logan's relationship.
And you like how I went the entire time without saying Scott is a dick?
Yes, you did an excellent job.
But he's a dick.
We don't directly address the idea that Xavier and Logan as a relationship is an issue, because it's not an issue. It's an asset. It's clear that he's been a positive influence on the man for a long time. The thing is, what were the goals of Xavier's relationships with Scott and with Logan? I think there were different goals there. Scott, I think, as we mentioned in his episode, was much more bred to be the leader of the team from the start. Logan is the kind of person overall that is someone that you place in, meaning it didn't matter if it was World War II. It didn't matter if it was the Weapon X project in Canada. You know, it doesn't matter if it's the 1800s. This is a guy that gets stuff done. He'll get it done in Japan. He'll get it done, you know, in the Savage Lands. He'll get it done anywhere.
I feel like you were starting to go for a song there.
No.
He'll get it done in Japan. He'll get it done in the Savage Lands. Like, I don't know.
No.
Sorry.
The point being, you know, it's insert hero, get results, and that's that. As opposed to someone like Scott, who basically, if you could change the name of the X-Men to the Scott Summers Foundation, I think he'd be very happy. And I don't mean that as an insult. I mean, he wants to have something that is truly his stamp on how things should be in the world, especially for mutants. You know, so people or an organization that he thinks is incredibly valuable. Logan has shown on multiple occasions that he won't limit himself to just one circumstance. He'll go wherever he thinks it's necessary and put himself in. And if you ever notice how people say they don't want to step on toes, Logan doesn't step on toes. He stomps on them, then starts getting out those, those claws and starts slashing. He doesn't mind being the agitator. And that's a big difference. Scott prefers to look at it from, dare I say, like the highest level on down, making sure that people know that's where he belongs. And when he's in a good relationship with someone like Jean Grey or with Emma Frost, once again, I'm not going down that dick route. Okay, I'm saying that when he has good, positive relationships that are working for him and he's in a position of leadership where he's getting the results he wants, no one really has an issue. When things start changing, that's when Scott starts to have a little bit of a problem. And when people like Wolverine, who have been shown to be able to adapt to certain situations, that's when they start to rise. And that's when other people start to notice, hey, maybe we don't have to just do it this one way. And if that's the case, you're going to have a situation where someone who wants to maintain the status quo versus someone who doesn't care about the status quo and just wants the results are going to start to clash. And it's going to happen over and over and over again. And unfortunately, the way these things usually get resolved is by looking at results, not looking at the processes of what happened before that, but to simply, did it work or didn't it work? And that's a very common way for everyone to look at these things. So there are going to be times where Scott decides that he's going to go ahead and just take on the Avengers. And there are going to be times where Wolverine says, that sounds like a bad idea because you're really starting to spite people. You're not going about it the right way. But of course, there's no such thing as diplomacy in any of this. So you just end up with some really cool drawn comics panels. But I think that's where that friction comes from. Obviously, the single relationship with Jean Grey is going to lead to that. That's really obvious. But the idea of what I would like to call static power versus dynamic power, that's something that is always going to create a baseline level of friction, let alone when there's a major event that's going on.
So Scott as the static power and Wolverine is the dynamic power.
Correct.
I can respect that. So that was a lot of issues, like I said, befitting a character of Wolverine's stature and longevity. Moving into treatment now, and starting as we always do with the in-universe, this is a scenario where, he's in love with one of the strongest telepaths in the universe, and he was mentored by the telepath of the Marvel Universe. So what hope would you have in breaking through with Logan? What would your goals of treatment or discussion be?
Well, to be honest with you, I would take the complete opposite approach. What I mean by that, and this is all hypothetical, people, I know we're not in fantasy world. He has people that are able to just simply dig in whenever they need to. So if there's something on his mind, he doesn't have to bring it up. They'll know it. Charles knows what's going on with Logan at any given time. So when there's something that has to be done, cool, man. We can talk about it. By the way, I just did it. That's it. There's none of the other steps to growth, though. It's the equivalent if you took a child that's crying and you hold them and you just say, okay, be happy. And then you put that child down. Did you really do anything? That's not true development. Now, if you actually show a child and talk to them and say, oh, well, what's going on? Why are you so upset? Oh, really? They did that? Oh, then what did you do? Oh, okay. Well, how did that make you feel? Okay. Do you know how that made them feel? Oh, wow. Okay. So maybe they felt the same way. I'm just giving that as an example.
If you give a man a fish versus if you teach a man to fish?
Exactly. I'm not saying that Logan is somehow inferior for using someone like Charles Xavier. It's clear that he's a very strong character. He has lots of great qualities, but it becomes a crutch. You're always just going to go to this one guy and say, hey, whatever you got to do in my brain, fix it. Okay, we're good. That's nice in a fictional world, but that's going to wear thin. And not only that, what happened to Charles? He's gone. So when he dies, okay, what does that mean? You just go to the next telepath? And by the way, I'm not lost on the irony because I'm a psychiatrist and most psychiatrists rely on people to show up in their office time after time. But once again, it's because there's a different goal there. The psychiatrist is not expecting a person to show up at their office, tell them, okay, be happy. And I'm not going to even go with the pejorative of, well, isn't that what you do with medication? No, that's a tool that clearly is not going to resolve most of the issues that a person has. And ultimately, whether it's 3 weeks of therapy or if it's a year of therapy, it doesn't matter. Whatever it takes for a person to improve their life, even if they never have to see a psychiatrist again, that's the goal. And that's the thing that people don't sometimes realize when it comes to mental health treatment. And that's something that I don't think Logan would recognize because he's able to use such quick means as these telepaths. And I'm saying this after we've done episodes on telepaths. I think that the idea that we could have those abilities would be fantastic, but since we don't, and so many other people still have to struggle with these things, Logan is not above struggle. We know that. So I think he could develop way better skills than what he has if he didn't just rely on someone to just go in his brain and say, fix it.
So Charles is actually, and Jean and all the other characters are doing Logan a disservice by helping him in that regard. They're helping him, but they're not doing him any favors long term. Right.
And you know who I think gets it right, and we've done an episode on this too, and that's Emma Frost. Emma Frost did a good job when she was dealing, I think, with the Sentry. Having said that, I think Emma Frost was kind of conniving with how she was dealing with Scott. So once again, I feel like I'm starting a counter movement here. Scott's not as much of a dick as you think.
Lies, but there's another one. I love these characters for who they are, but when we get to the out-of-universe treatment, I always blanch because how do you make a comparison between Wolverine and a real person?
Okay.
I'm just going to straight up just go, I don't even know.
Okay.
And God bless you if you can come up with something.
Okay. I'm not going to go with the decades upon decades thing, but I will go with someone who's been an experienced veteran. I'm going to say a police officer, someone in the military, firefighter, someone of those types of services. In other words, they've seen some things and they're just trying to make sure that they're able to deal with the headaches and the memory loss from, you know, some random traumatic events, some of which they played a role in for the, you know, for the better, some of which didn't turn out so well, the impact that it's had on their families, on their relationships, almost like a PTSD type of situation, although it doesn't have to be PTSD itself. They don't have to have those particular symptoms. Dealing with someone like that, the first thing you have to do is show your respect. You know, thank you for your service, or thank you for what you've done with your job, or what you continue to do with your job. Because those servicemen and women, or those officers, correction officers, whatever, people in those lines don't hear that enough. And I know it may sound stereotypical, but it's not meant to, because really, when you think about the last time you actually said that to someone, it usually makes their day. So that's the first part. Beyond that, you start with what their goals are, as with anyone else. What's something that you feel is not quite where it should be in your life? Is it with your family? Is it with your job? Is it with your physical health? Whatever it is. The person may not say that they have a mental problem. They may say, you know what? I noticed I'm not as strong as I used to be. I used to be able to bench, you know, whatever. I used to be able to bench 300. Now I can only bench like 200. You know, now you might think, how would a psychiatrist impact that? Like, well, wait a minute. What's changed? Well, I noticed I'm not going to the gym as much. Okay, well, why? You know, basically it comes down to, there's a technique. It's called the 5 whys. In other words, you just keep asking yourself the question, why? And every time you answer that one, you ask why again. Kind of like how a little kid would do. I
was literally just about to say, so every 3-year-old it becomes a psychiatrist.
Right. So to get back to what I was talking about, not to get too far off tangent, but I had to explain what I was doing. Okay. I'm not as physically strong as I was. I used to be able to bench 300. Now I bench 200. Okay, well, why? Well, I haven't been going to the gym as much. Okay, well, why? Well, my schedule has really changed. Okay, well, why? Well, because I noticed on the job, I didn't feel as comfortable on the day shift because the guy that I'm working with seems like he's such a jerk. Okay, but why? Well, I noticed that basically they started calling me these, what I think are derogatory names. Like, what do you mean? Like, why? Like, well, basically they think I'm too old. Okay. So it took all of that to just get to the idea that you're either dealing with something like ageism in the workplace, in which case you can't personally change it that quickly. Obviously, you should advocate for yourself or get people to advocate for you. But at the same time, but how do you feel about yourself? Do you feel old? And if the person says, no, I feel like I'm still me, like, okay, great. But a lot of times the person will say to you, actually, I'm wondering if I'm not the person I used to be. And when you get to something like that, it becomes, okay, you're not going to be the person you used to be. Who are you now? And who do you want to be in the future? And you help that person guide their next steps, whatever that is. So no, I can't say to the person, oh yeah, no problem. I'm just going to give you some steroids to be back up to benching 300 in no time. Of course not. You're going to say, I understand that you used to do that, and it's fantastic that you did that. That actually means you've accomplished a lot in your life, in addition to your job and everything else that you've done. Once again, building up the parts of the past that are important. All right. And what do you have going for you now? Because clearly, if you want to still go to the gym, you can find ways. You help them adapt to current circumstances, not ignore them. And then say, okay, so what's going to be your new goal? If you're at 200 now, maybe we can get you back to 210, which seems like a small goal. But if the person says, I just did 201 and for some reason that was a hurdle. Okay, well, was it your technique? Do we need a coach? Like, do you need a personal trainer? Or is it a matter of you didn't sleep? We need to change your sleep pattern so that you're able to have more energy. Whatever it is. I'm giving this as an example. It doesn't have to be this way. But the point remains that when you have someone that has been through a lot of things in their life and they're either not feeling respected or they don't have an outlet to continue to feel valued, it can create impact in so many other ways. And you have to start to parse out what realm needs the greatest influence on your part as a therapist. So I'm just giving this as one example. There are so many other ways I could have gone. This is the first thing that came to mind. But that's what I'm thinking of, because last time I checked, I don't have any patients that have adamantium in their system. Not that adamantium exists. And I don't have a patient with claws that extend and retract out of their wrists or back of their hand or whatever the heck that is. And I certainly don't have anybody with a healing factor, at least not like that.
But do you have anybody with a really weird hairdo?
Oh, tons of that.
And then like the mutton chop sideburns?
You know what? I've never seen someone quite with that. Not quite.
Okay. That's fair. I can respect that. But at least you got some people with weird hair.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess that works. If nothing else, it's different.
Yeah.
All right. So let's hope that you scotch guarded the thing. And let's see what happens when Wolverine gets on Dr. Issues' couch.
Hello, Logan. I'm Dr. Issues.
Doc.
I'm sensing some hesitation here. What's on your mind?
You mean you can't even read minds?
Nope.
Then what the hell am I even doing here?
I mean, we could talk about...
I don't do talk.
You mentioned the whole reading minds thing. I think I know who you're talking about. It's Professor Xavier, right?
You want a cookie?
So he's been in your mind, and you're okay with that?
Charles earned that after years of trust. I don't know you.
Well, now we have a framework. How did he build that level of trust?
By understanding the struggle.
Well, there's a Mr. Summers who enlightened me.
Yeah, I know you talked to Scott.
He can be a bit standoffish.
He's a dick.
I'm not going to speak ill of another mutant.
It has nothing to do with the fact that he's a mutant. He's just a dick.
So you're able to separate those two things clearly.
What's your game?
I don't play games. I know that your time is valuable and you're the best at what you do. But for the time being, maybe we can discuss how you can do it in a nicer way.
Do you know a nicer way to stop soldiers from kidnapping or killing mutant kids? Do you know a nicer way to stop Sentinels from destroying everything? Is there a nicer way to do what I do? No.
I can't help you with those physical things, but you didn't even mention the things that I think you do just as well, if not better.
Oh, yeah? And what are those?
You're a mentor, a teacher, a friend. On several occasions, you've been a selfless hero. I mean, you don't need claws or a healing factor to do those things.
Yeah, and?
Do you not agree with that?
I do.
Then why are you cutting it so short?
I just don't think of myself as... Wait a minute. Why am I even telling you this?
Because you don't even get this opportunity, especially with Charles.
He can read my mind. Where do you get that idea?
Exactly. He does all the dirty work. I'm putting you back in the driver's seat. If you don't think you're ready for that level of control when it comes to talking about these topics...
What makes you think I'm not ready? And why do you think he does the dirty work? How are you even a licensed psychiatrist?
Then please help me understand. When you talk to Charles, do you ask him to scan your mind, or does he do it automatically?
Of course I ask him. He doesn't just probe into my brain without asking, which is more than I can say for this session.
And when he does it, is it comfortable?
Not always. Depends on how deep he has to go. What difference does it make? He goes in, he finds what I need him to find, and we get it done.
And has he shown you how to do it yourself?
He does what he does, I do what I do. That's how this works.
And when he's not around?
What's with all these and questions? Where are you going with this?
Look, at some point you're going to be by yourself with your own thoughts, your own emotions. It doesn't matter if it's me or Charles or some supervillain or other telepath. You're going to have to deal with those things going on in your mind, and I hope that you've learned Charles' lessons well. Look, as you know, sometimes having a different teacher with a different point of view can open up new possibilities. I'm not trying to replace Charles. I'm complimenting what he's already given you.
I've been around for long enough to know how to deal with my own thoughts. I cope the way that works for me. I don't ask you to do it my way, so just leave me alone.
You're right. I can't force you to do anything that you don't want to do. So consider this an open invitation. Anytime you want to talk, but you don't want it to feel like mental surgery, you know where to find me.
Yeah, you're up your own ass. So long, bub. So, I don't think that went that well.
No, he wasn't really ready to open up to me.
Do you think there's ever going to come a point in which he is?
I honestly don't know. But like I said, it's an open invitation, and sometimes patients just have to make that decisions for themselves.
All right. I mean, that is kind of what we're all about here. The patient has to make the determinations. We, and by we, I mean you, just offer the venue, and it's leading a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I don't know exactly the drinking patterns of Wolverines anyway.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's a lot of beer.
Yeah, fair enough.
So on that note, we're going to end this episode. But before we get out of here, we're going to do something a little different, something new that we haven't done before. We're going to read some of our listener reviews at the end of the episode. So if you're listening to this on a platform that allows you to rate and review, we ask that you please like and subscribe and leave a positive review. And in a future episode, we will read your review on the episode. So we're going to start with this one from Jade AX314. Gave us a 5-star review. This is fun. I just found this podcast on Reddit, and yeah, I'm just totally nerding out with each episode, specifically the Moon Knight episode. So yeah. Keep it up, and I will continue to listen. So thank you so much, Jade AX314. We hope that you are still rocking out with us. We hope that you're still listening to this very episode. We appreciate your positive feedback. So thank you so much. And as always, I am willing to talk to anybody who's a fellow Moon Knight fan. So I love that. And you get major props from me. So thank you for that. You can also follow us on Twitter, Capes on the Couch. Myself and Doc also both have individual Twitter accounts, so you can follow me at Anthony Sitko and Doc at Doc Issues, and we will interact with you if you like. You give us a shout out. We're very, very active and interactive with our fans because you guys are the ones who make this happen, so we appreciate each and every one of you. We've got a Facebook page with a group now, so if you are a fan of Capes on the Couch, you can go to facebook.com/Capes on the Couch, and you can find the group and interact with other fans of the show. We spread subscribe and share links. There's some polls, and hopefully we can grow and build the community. I'm debating on whether or not I'm going to build a subreddit for the show. Maybe that'll be something we'll get into at a later time. So, and as always, you can find all of our episodes on our website, capesonthecouch.live, and we are distributed through the Libsyn network, and we're on Google Play, iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. So that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Next week is our episode on Molecule Man, is another Patreon president request. And then we've got Doctor Strange. Then it's a 1 week break. And then it's our crossover episode with Popcorn Psychology and our friends over there. So please give them a listen and check out their show. Doc, anything you want to add before we leave?
I may not be the best at what I do, but I do try and be nice about it.
Well, I guess that counts for something. I don't know what, but it counts for something. So for Doc Issues, I'm Anthony Sitko. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.
Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.